Hello, everyone. My name is Naomi Armendariz. I'm the wife of Pastor Roberto Armendariz in Lafayette, Indiana. We're at the Primera Iglesia Bautista First Baptist Church of Lafayette, Indiana. I have something very special for you kids today, something that I've always wanted to do. I'm going to begin a series of sharing books with you and reading books to you. The very first book that we're going to be starting with is called The Bridge by Jeri Massi. As you can see, it's a well-worn book. It's one of my favorites. I've had it since I was a kid myself. And we're going to call this series of stories Tell Me a Story, Fiction for the Christian Kid. And this is series number 1, The Bridge. It's The Bridge by Jeri Massi, and we're going to jump right into the chapter 1, Escape at Night. And of course, everything here is perfectly legal to read for educational and nonprofit purposes. So let us begin. Escape at night. Come war, the soldier earns his trade. Beat the drums, my heart inspire. Bring me my iron blade. My helmet rivet on, bring me the prancing horse. Gird on my sword of fire. Nay, come there many boots on cobblestones that ring? Disarm me where the waters course, my iron helm unhinge. A river boat shall be my horse, one axe shall overthrow a king. In the night the soldier creeps, midway from shore to shore. High above the murky deep he finds a slender wooden floor. 'Twill one man safely keep, whose axe shall end a war. Long ago a river divided 2 kingdoms, one great one and one small one. The large kingdom was Folger, with a fullness to its name that sounded out the fullness of its boundaries. The small kingdom, like the bric-a-brac along the shelf, was called Bracken. Now the king of Bracken rode to attend his brother's fox hunt, and the king left his daughter Rosalynn in care of his most trusted knight, Sir Reynold. And even as the king of Bracken went out to hunt and sport, Lord Rigel, master of Folger, went to hunt in earnest. He set his heart to swallow up the little kingdom and slay every royal person down to the princess herself. Now Rigel of Folger was broad. He stood no higher than a horse's shoulder, but he was so wide with muscle that he could actually tear young trees from the ground, a sport he found entertaining when he was out riding. Wily as a fox he was, and sharp as a knife, but for all his shrewdness he could not make his land produce crops. Forest he had in abundance along his side of the river, overflowing with trees, but his fields were poor, as though the ground itself rebelled against so barbaric a ruler as he. So the king laid his plans for the complete and utter takeover of Bracken, and his plans fell so that he would attack the moment night fell on the first day of the first month of spring. But to Sir Reynold, thoughts of battle were distant, like the blurry horizon line. Wars had long since ceased. The only entranceway to Bracken was over the bridge that spanned the river. The Bracken soldiers guarded it day and night, so that for 15 long years the hungry armies of Folger had been stilled. Even though the Felgerians outnumbered the Bracken soldiers, only 10 men could cross the bridge side by side together, so a small force on the Bracken side could have stood off the entire forces of Folger. Bracken's safety hung on being alerted to enemies on the bridge. In this time of peace, few suspected an attack. Reynold, a knight with many battles in the distant past, kept sentries posted along the pathways to the bridge. He worried little. The 2 nations were at peace. In the early afternoon he walked with her little majesty through the garden and out past the stables to the patch where wild strawberries grew. "Oh, Reynold, let me go riding with you," Princess Rosalynn begged him that afternoon. Put me in front of your great saddle and ride with me." "Nay, my lady," he said, smiling at her as fondly as any beloved uncle would have done. "My poor horse is old, like I am. He wants his oats right now. Maybe later we can ride." "You know that you aren't old," she retorted. "It's untruth to say it. Your hair's not even white yet." "Little Majesty, you mustn't rebuke your subjects so. I'm old enough." He swept her off her feet to make her laugh and swung her in a circle with one arm. But as he spun toward the north, he felt a chill, and his eyes scanned the horizon hungrily. Some telltale sign had struck a deep note in him, warning him of danger. Even he wasn't sure what it was, warning him of danger, but he wasn't sure if there was something in that late afternoon sky that he hadn't seen before. "I will take you to your supper," he said at last. Then he noticed what was troubling him. The birds that normally roosted in the forest along the river were winging their way over fields and meadows in search of new roosting places. His keen soldier's eye saw that something had disturbed them, some great hubbub crossing over the bridge into the forest, and his heart suddenly beat coldly with suspicion. For it takes great noise and great numbers to frighten away birds from a forest. He hurried into the great house with her. "Stay in the kitchen with your nurse," he told her. He handed her into the care of the old servant who had been mother to Rosalynn since the Queen's death. The knight hurried forward to the courtyard and up the battlements to scan the fringe of trees on the far side of the fields. To be sure, he saw only a lone sentry riding pell-mell for the great gate. "Muster the men!" he ordered quickly to his captain. "Sound the alarm and prepare to close the gates." Trumpeters quickly blared the warning. From below, horses neighed in protest as they were driven out for saddling. Men shouted. Peasants from the neighboring fields halloed to each other and came running. And all the while, the sentry in the distance drove his horse on as a man insane, bent forward for the castle. "The castle guard is summoned, my leader," the captain told him. Reynold looked down in dismay at a small group of soldiers standing resolute and ready down below. "Where are the others?" "Home in the fields, sire. Ploughing time is on us. The king spared them to go." Reynold turned and saw the sentry come riding in, disappearing under the stone archway below as his horse scrambled into safety. "Close the gate," he ordered. "Have every bowman take his position on the parapet. Bring that sentry to me." "As you wish, sire." The captain raced away to carry out his orders. Moments later, one of the young pages led the exhausted sentry to Reynold. "Enemies on the bridge, sir! They quietly slipped in and took the sentries last night in the dark woods. Only I have escaped. I hid in the woods all day for fear of being killed, but at last I took one of their horses and made a dash for the castle. Rigel of Folger himself will ride over the bridge with a new troop at sunset and storm the castle at last light. Such is what I've overheard from the murderous forward guard." "Sunset," Reynold said. The sun had already dipped past the line of trees. "Fetch me the king's second-best crown," he told the page who was still standing nearby, "and fetch me the ermine-trimmed robe. Tell the royal valet that the crown and robe are necessary to save the princess. Show him my ring. Go quickly." Down below, a half a dozen burly gate guards were straining at the huge doors, slowly pulling them in a semicircle until they closed with an echoing slam of mighty oak against solid stone. Immediately, 12 men climbed atop the soldiers of 12 of their fellows and sat there. An enormous tree, trimmed of its branches and cut square, was hefted onto the sweating shoulders of men below, then lifted to the men above them. These men, muscles straining, lifted the bar and set it into the great iron tongues that would hold it in place. Up above, Reynold struggled into the king's robe. He stared at the crown a moment, as though preparing himself for something painful. Then he set it on his head and gave it a slight tug as though it were his helmet. "I go to the princess," he told the astonished captain. "Defend the wall. Rigel of Folger takes no prisoners." "We have no choice but to fight. You," he called to the page, "send Heron the rider to the kitchen." Quickly he left the courtyard. Reynold entered the kitchen, where Rosalynn and her nurse were waiting. "Good woman, release me," Rosalynn said to her when she saw Reynold. She pulled herself away from her nurse's arms. "Explain yourself," she said sharply to Reynold. "Your manner of dressing greatly displeases us. It is treasonous to wear the king's crown and robe." "Aye, little Majesty," he agreed respectfully. "My conduct is shocking, and may be wasted in the end, but I hope to serve my king. In this I am clear of guilt." "Explain yourself," she repeated. "The castle is under attack. Your father's old enemy, Rigel of Folger, is marching this way to storm the castle. Our circumstances are hopeless, and your life is in great danger. I plan to save you." "How so? By stealing my father's crown for yourself?" she demanded. Undaunted by his size and sure of her authority, she took a step closer. In all her 10 years, she had been taught that one day her word would be law, and she feared no person in all of her father's realm. "Guards!" she called. "Seize this impostor!" But nothing happened. "Nay, little princess," he said gravely. "Squires!" he called. His squires, 3 of them, entered from behind him. "Bring me peasant clothes to fit this child," he said to one of them, "and summon my wife." Then to the princess he added, "Time is essential, little Majesty, and I cannot allow you to order me to stop, nor can I grant you the grace of time to consider my plans. Speed is necessary, and I will spare you the heartbreak of this decision. As regent, I will proceed as I think best." "By dressing me in peasant clothes for this pretend war of yours?" she demanded. "Never! Guards!" Still no guards came. "You are a disloyal traitor!" she shrieked, more like a terrified child than a princess. "Take off that crown!" He remained unmoved, and she started to run out of the kitchen. Just as quickly as he raised his hand, the 2 remaining squires blocked the doorways. "Do you yet not see what Rigel would do if he found the royal princess?" Reynold began. "Traitor!" she shrieked. "Your Majesty," he began, trying to calm her, "I plead with you to control yourself." Just then the 3rd squire returned with the clothing and Reynold's wife. "You must trust me now, Rosalynn," he told her. "My wife will dress you if you do not obey. You are to go to your rooms and remove your royal clothes, wearing instead the clothing of a farm girl." "No!" He nodded to the nearest squire. Struggling and screaming, Rosalynn was picked up and carried to her rooms. Reynold turned to his wife. "Do to her as I commanded. Her nurse will help you. I suspect it will take both of you. Spare not for her tears, but work quickly." They hurried out, following the crying and shouting princess and the dogged squire carrying her. "Well done," Reynold said to the other young men. "Go attend the other job on the wall." Just then Heron the rider strode in. He wore high brown boots, green leggings, and a loose green tunic with a spacious cowl. Heron was barely 18, lean and light as a whip, yet almost as tall as Reynold himself. "You sent for me, my lord?" he asked. Though the whole castle was in a panic to prepare for the impending siege, he carried himself as calmly as though spring plowing were in the order for the day. "Aye," Reynold said. "You alone don't seem to be surprised at finding me dressed as the king." "Nay, I see your plan. If the castle falls in battle, the soldiers of that scoundrel, Rigel of Folger, will think they have killed the King of Bracken. It is a good and noble plan." He gave a quick nod of grim approval. "You expect nothing less than bravery from yourself and others, Heron," the old knight said. "Yet your task this night is to flee with the princess to his true majesty with the news of the attack." "Flying through these woods tonight may have danger enough to settle my stomach, but how can we get out? The gate is barred. As I came in, the archers were busy plying their wares. War is now upon us. My squares have gone to knock out part of the south wall and make a hole for a horse to be let out. Then you and the princess must ride like the wind." "Aye, liege. Where is her majesty?" "Upstairs, being forced into peasant clothes." "I see." The tall and manly youth's eyebrows went up. "Her majesty dislikes your plans?" "She has no understanding, Heron. How could I take the time to explain it all to her, and then risk that she would understand and order me to forbear and keep her here? My bones tell me the castle will fall. Rosalynn must escape. So long as there is even a child of the royal family, then Bracken will yet overthrow the yoke of Folger. The people shall stand behind their princess, and news must reach the king in time." "Aye." Heron shifted his weight. "My wife will see that the jewel of royalty is set around her neck and hidden under her garments. Take care that it is not wrenched off. It is her claim to the throne." "Aye." "Come, she must be ready by now." They strode out into the great hall in time to see Rosalynn, now exhausted from her struggles, weeping as she was led down the stairs. Even through the shuttered windows in the hall, shouts from the parapets were drifting inside, and they could hear a muffled boom, boom, as a battering ram tested its strength against the sturdy gates. At sight of Reynold, the princess hung back and glared. But then she saw young Heron the rider. "Heron!" she cried, and flung herself into his arms. "Oh, Heron, save me! Look at what they have done to me!" "There now, my little princess," he said tenderly. "Have no fear. Your faithful Heron is here, and nobody will hurt you." "You are still loyal to me, then?" she asked, looking up at him. "Dear and gracious lady," he said, stroking her ruffled and damp curls, "every man and woman in this room is loyal to you." "We are ready to die for you," Reynold insisted, troubled by her terror and hatred of him. She turned her back to him. "Come," Heron told her. "I will take you to your father. The castle is under siege, and we must ride swiftly and silently, though night falls around us." She turned and eyed Sir Reynold, but he was in control of himself again and only looked at her sorrowfully. "Is this his order?" she asked suspiciously. Instead of answering directly, Heron said, "It is my own fondest wish to deliver my princess from the jaws of danger. Will you come with me, dear Princess Rosalynn? Once we are out of danger, I will even let you hold the reins, and I have sugar that you can feed my horse Javelin, if he doesn't frighten you." Speech like this was more to the princess's liking. "Yes, I will go with you, Heron," she said, smoothing down her rough peasant dress with great dignity. "Please take me to my father." "Aye, little majesty." He took her hand and led her out. Reynold followed. At first it was a great comfort to walk hand in hand with the handsome and loyal Heron. But all around the north wall, where the gate was, the men were sweating and shooting and toiling in earnest, and huge torches were being lit, guttering and sputtering. Above all there rose a burning smell, and a smell of sweat, fear, and terrible earnestness. Resolutely he led her back to the south wall, with Reynold a short distance behind. The sky was lowering, the grounds growing darker as the sun slid away behind the western walls. "See there," Heron said as they saw the young men hacking at the wall with pickaxes and hammers. "We will lead Javelin out that hole and escape." "Oh, Heron!" she said, and looked up. Yes, princess. They have taken my queenly garments and given me peasant clothes, and now I am taken away secretly. No one outside the walls would know I am the princess. Promise me you are not going to take me out into the forest to kill me. I have read of stories like this in my storybooks. Promise me this isn't your plan. Why, Rosalynn! He was truly shocked. I mean, your majesty, may I be hanged if ever I had the thought. Nay, I will not do that. Besides, say not that every trace of royalty has been taken from you. I trust that you have the royal jewel round your neck. I do. One secret treasure that a man may kill for, she said sadly. It is a great and evil thing to mistrust your servants so, he told her soberly. I excuse your momentary fear, but you must not continue to accuse me to yourself. Too many storybooks have affected you. Just then Reynold brought up the horse. The knight leading the horse looked out of place in his crown and ermine robe. Ride for your lives, he murmured to Heron. The gate is breaking down. You have only minutes to get a head start and escape. Aye. Come, Majesty, Heron said, and the princess led the horse out the narrow hole in the wall. Reynold followed. Beloved princess, farewell, he called after her. If I live to see my father, you and your treacherous wife shall be hanged, she called back to him. Nevertheless, farewell, sweet princess, Reynold said. These words have dropped to the ground between us. Think nothing of them when the time comes. And he shaded his eyes with his hands. Heron lifted the princess onto the saddle and swung up behind her. Remorse and shame shall drive those words back at you, he told her as he urged Javelin to a trot through the heavy trees. This night Reynold will lay down his life for your majesty. He plans to claim the throne. Nay, you have no understanding. Now hush, I must listen. The woods were dim with the settling night. In the distance, from the other side of the castle, they could hear horns blowing and horses screaming. But at that moment, the battle was still small and intense, focused on the castle gates. The woods were safe yet. Heron hurried his horse. Javelin specially trained, he whispered. He knows these woods by night, and so do I. That will give us a good lead. For the first time, the princess took some thought of the besieged castle and the people inside. I thought the battle would have to be halted when darkness fell. Nay, above this canopy of branches, the moon and stars are out. Rigel has them and his torch-bearers to guide his army. You must pity your subjects that fall into his hands. I won't pity Reynold. Oh, sorrow, that my princess should be so embittered. You seek revenge on your truest friend and spare no thought for your own people. It had been better for me to have fought and died by Reynold's side than to know how little the princess counts the lives of her people. But I must deliver this miserable package to my king. His rebuke stung her into resentful and hurt silence. They rode on without speaking. For some time, anger and confusion fought in the princess's heart. But at last, these gave way to a stiffness in her limbs. Then sleepiness. At last she dozed against him, falling into a deep sleep. And that is the end of chapter 1. Here we see Heron and Rosalynn riding away from the castle wall with Reynold watching them as they go away. And I will see you next time for chapter 2.